So I will start the recording and I will present Howard's presentation. Give me just a second. Okay, you can see my screen right now, correct?
I can't see it, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
Can you...
Okay.
Maybe it's just me. Can everybody else see it?
Yes, everyone else is seeing
okay.
it.
Well, we'll go ahead with it because I've had the deck up beside me here, so I'll just say like advanced. So I want to say, start off with the main slide, but if you can go to the second one, who am I?
Yes.
I want to say hello to everybody. I'm Howard Burston. I'm the IT lead with the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. At this present time, we are engaged in quite an undertaking. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but I really want to touch a little bit about, put some reference around who I am as an individual and sort of put some context around, cultural context around how I look at my career and all those pieces that support it. So I'm from Fisher River Cree Nation, which is, of course, in the Interlake. When I look at my life and when I try and manage my career, one of the things I look at and just put some cultural relevance around it is I look at it from the perspective of the medicine wheel. And on the east side is always for us Cree folk is always the physical. So, and that's sort of represented by my youngest son, who again has played hockey in the NCAA and has achieved quite a bit there. But that physical piece, taking care of yourselves, is a very important piece as you move forward. I'm active. I still play hockey. I still go to the gym. That's an important piece of my life. And again, some things that we can't forget as we start moving forward in our careers and get a little older, that physical piece, taking care of yourself, getting a good night's sleep and so on, eating properly. My wife often says you can't eat like a 15-year-old forever, Howard, So again, starting to be a bit more conscious and conscious about those decisions. And the other piece that I look at, from the South is that emotional piece and maintaining and supporting those emotional relationships that, will go to help you and have helped me throughout the years. I've been very fortunate. I've, been with my wife for 30 years, but I've also have a very close knit, and I'll talk about, that emotional support that I've had and later on a little bit in the presentation, but, maintaining and having and nurturing those relationships, healthy relationships with those around you is very important in terms of having a balanced and living the good life, as we say. So again, you must make time to maintain those relationships. The third piece is, of course, from the West, and that's the mental piece. So it's sort of represented by, the book there, some of the reading that I've done over the past few years regarding leading transformation. And, right now that's what I'm doing. Understanding transformation, IT transformation, and how it's important not only to look at it from a technical perspective, but also a humanistic perspective, because when you're leading transformation like I am currently and have over the past few years, the human element is very, very important in all of that. It's probably the most key element to your success. So we have to always keep in mind that we do have to keep on learning and keep on studying. And the last piece I'll talk about is represented by the top, by my oldest son, who likes to go on the land and do things. And that's a spiritual piece. That's the piece that the place where hope and inspiration comes from, is that spiritual piece. And maintaining it and having a well-balanced life is very important to me. It's important as individuals that, we, at times, although we may focus on, the mental aspect, in terms of getting your diplomas, your degrees throughout the years, that's very important and the focus should be there. But, again, we want to make sure that we are within our lives, leading a well-balanced life in all of those aspects. So again, that's one of the things I try to do. It's not easy. Sometimes I do fail, but then I just regroup and start focusing on those areas that I maybe haven't been tending to. One of the last pieces I'll talk to you about regarding that is in this day and age, especially with the stresses that we're under, I'm sure that your studies and so on are very important. What I'm going to say to you is that, it's very important that you take care of yourselves, that you take that time to do, a bit of, release of the stress. And one of the things I'll say is I often read authors, Breanna Brown is an author that talks about, relationships and maintaining your internal balance. And those types of skill sets are like learning, routing maps or routing tables. It's the same sort of application. If you don't exercise or if you don't practice, maintaining a healthy stress level, then it can affect you later on. And again, we want to make sure that in this day and time, we want to make sure that, we are taking care of ourselves, that we're taking care of that spiritual aspect and that emotional aspect as we go forward. Can we jump to slide 3? And so I love this because one of the things that I've really talking in front of people is in doing these presentations, I have to do from time to time, but it's not my wheel set. It's not, my true gift. I somewhat enjoy it, but I'll be honest with you, in the cultural context, when we look at things, it's like the gift that's on there. I like being the guy in the chair, the guy that's, supporting things and coming up with crazy ideas for us to achieve our goals. It's often, my former boss, Lauren Keeper, used to say, Howard, there's got to be a way we can do this. Go figure it out. And he would send me off and I would get my team together. So again, one of the things that inspires me is being that guy in the chair, the guy that people come to and say, hey, how can we do this? And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. I was really flattered when the province approached me and said, hey, we really like what you've done with the MFN ERC. We need to find a way to have one common student information system for all the provinces. Would you come and help us out? I was really flattered and honored by that they came and asked me to do that. And that's one of those big challenges that comes up. And that's the other thing that inspires me is the big challenges that do come up. Like and I'll talk a bit about it later on when we talk a bit about some of the projects. But as we move forward, that's, one of the things that fuels me is being the guy in the chair, some of the big challenges that, if you're successful, that happen. And then, for me, when I look at some of the big challenges, the other thing that keeps me going is the possible. Like, what is possible here? What can we do here that nobody else has thought of? And so as we start moving forward, and what I want to say and preface before I go too far, because when I say I actually mean we, because whenever I have, do these large projects, I have a great team. Whether it's with the MFN ERC or whether it's with the province of Manitoba. I've been very fortunate to have a great team around me of folks that have great, extraordinary gifts that complement my own. So I want to just, preface that by saying that, no big thing is ever done by one particular person, but, having the opportunity to be that part of these great teams is fantastic. The other thing that, sort of fuels me is some of my mentors who have done some great things, despite, some difficulties that have happened, lack of technology, lack of infrastructure, they've still gotten things done. And that's, when I reflect back on what they're doing, they always inspire me. Again, even some of my mentors, and I'll talk about them in the next slide, they aren't necessarily IT people, but they inspire me none as such. And one of the things that I also want to talk a little bit about is fear. Fear inspires me. It inspires me because it's a bit of fuel to make sure that, I'm doing my due diligence, that I'm working as hard as I can on whatever I'm focused on at that time. Because again, one of the things that when you lead some of these large projects, it can come to you at a certain point where you go, wow, I cannot believe I agreed to do this. And then you have a bit of fear and trepidation that sneaks in. And, again, that's where you go back to, again, some of those pieces I talked about earlier in the last slide, where, again, you have to tap into that spiritual piece where you calm those things. But it's a fuel that will keep you moving forward and searching for the possible and making sure that you're doing things. And one of the things I'll encourage you as you start moving out and finishing up your time at Red River or wherever you may be, I'll say is that, I'll encourage you to take those challenges as they come to you, and they are scary. I'm in my mid 50s, and when I took on this responsibility 8 months ago, it was scary. It was scary, and it was new, and it was different, and I was going to a completely foreign environment. But it was a challenge, and it was interesting. And that's what I'll say is that the other piece is that, for me, what inspires me is happiness. And at this point in my career, I know I'm in the right spot when I'm happy. And that, again, when I jump up first thing in the morning and I go check my email at, 7:15 and see, does anything need to be tended to right away? Again, that to me is a key indicator that, I am happy where I am at. And I'll encourage you to find that happiness in the workplace. And I'll share a little story with you about that. My son, who was on the snowmobile that you saw earlier, he's done well. He actually graduated out of the program that you folks are in. He actually works for Unipoint, and he's done very well, and was offered another position with another company. And his company actually ended up, liked him as an employee and said, hey, listen, we can almost match, or we can. He came to me and he said, well, what do you think? And I said to him, at this point, it's, a few more dollars, what does that really matter? I said to him, where are you happy? Where are you comfortable? Are you happy with your current company? Oh yeah, I like everybody. And I said, then that's all that matters. I think you should stay. And then that's, he came to that same conclusion. I think that happiness, inspires people to be there. So again, as we go forward, learning those lessons throughout life is, again, is very important. Can we go to the next slide with the mentors, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So as I said before, I grew up in a Cree culture. One of the things that we have in the Cree culture is what we call a matriarchal society, which is that the women lead and do most of the, directional decisions and so on. And, I've been really fortunate in my life. I've had, my mom was awesome. She passed quite a few years ago, but the group of ladies on the left, really helped raise me. They're my older cousins. I call them my aunties. Like, again, and that's something that is common in First Nations culture. But Lori, Myra Laramie, who's a well-known educator. My cousin Sharon, who worked in the North with education for many years. And then my cousin Janice there, she was an educator in the inner city. And then my cousin Noreen, she's blind, but she's a really gifted artist. I have no idea how she makes the beautiful pottery that she does, but she does. It just amazes me. It's a gift I've never had. So again, those ladies are part of my support circle, and again, and that support circle doesn't always mean that they don't shield me from the truth. And so, if I need a kick in the butt, they're always willing to give me one. The lady in the middle is the late Gwen Merrick. She was my mentor for a number of years. She taught me how to be a good leader, how to be conscious of my team, keeping an eye on my team, and really taught me how to become a very effective director and executive. And I'm forever grateful to her. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. She's from my home community of Fisher River. And the group of guys on the left are a group of friends that I have that, I bounce ideas off and talk to and so on. And, again, we have Jamie Wilson, who's former I think he's with Red River right now, and he was a former deputy minister. I have Bill Murdoch, who's the acting CEO of Clear Sky Connections. He's a very good friend of mine. Derek Baxter, who's a good friend and who's always a hoot. He's a handful. Every group of friends has that handful, and he's that one. And of course, my very good friend Dwayne Bird, who's an inspiration in terms of his courage on going out. Dwayne worked for me when we were developing Wapasqua, and at a certain point he came to me and said, and he was a young man, he was only in his mid-20s, and said, what, Howard, I'm going to strike out on my own because I know it's a chance, but I'm going to go and give it a go. And I take my hat off to his courage to do that. Like, again, it takes a lot of courage and thought and planning as you move forward in doing those things. So I'm fortunate with the people I have circled around me in terms of who they are and what they can do. So again, as my mentors, I try and circle myself around with people who care about me and who are thoughtful. And that's what I'll encourage you to do is reach out and have that group that you can lean on or get advice from. And these group of people here are essential to me in terms of moving forward with my career. And I know I haven't talked a lot about that yet, but I guess when you're starting out, what I'll say to you is you'll have many, many, many jobs as you start moving through the industry. And so, focusing in on just one thing is and how you move forward. I think for what the message I like to give to you is that, you need to have a good balanced life to have a successful career. You need to have good people surrounding you, and I'm very fortunate to have that. And you need to have honest people that are going to tell you when you need to correct certain things. So I'm very fortunate to have that. But I'd like to move on to the next slide, which talks about the big challenges that I've undertaken and some of the things that have happened. Just going forward, I haven't talked at all about my current project, but I will. But Wapasqua Virtual Collegiate, when we were looking at a solution, and here's no big project happens without having a really big need, and there was a really big need. One of the things that was brought to me was, we need to keep students in their community because when they leave their communities to attain classes like chemistry or shops or technical, they're not as successful. So one of the things we started to look at is, okay, how could we provide those courses? And this was back about 2012. And then we had done some online stuff, and I said, well, why don't we just create our own virtual collegiate, and then students can take the courses online and can stay in their communities. And they're saying, great, come up with a plan. So I came up with a plan and an estimate, and it was, I think back then it was about $8 million over 4 years just to get it going. And I thought, well, that's a lot of money. There's no one who's going to give me that kind of money. And so we went and presented it to Indigenous Affairs. And sure enough, they said, you know what? We think this is a great idea. We're going to fully fund it. And then it was that piece of, sort of panic. Well, like, oh my God, now I got this extra responsibility, this extra stress. But you know what? After sitting down and talking to my team at the MFNERC, and we sat down and we started troubleshooting and we started planning. We did a lot of planning before we did anything, and that's one of the things I'll encourage you to do is to do a lot of planning before you start spending a dollar. So as we started moving through there, we started solutioning, and one of the things I'm very proud of is that we actually have the only fully synchronous virtual collegiate in Manitoba. So again, it's not one of those online. It's not one of those online schools where you're just reading text and solving problems and handing in assignments. This is actual face-to-face, just like we're doing here. And so I'm really, really proud of that work that we did. And that led into some of the other pieces. I'm going to be cognizant of my time because I want to make sure that I leave time for any questions. It led into some of the other projects that we're doing, like at the bottom. That was the leadership team, and it was led by, on the left, the late Shirley Malcolm. and also it was led by Nora Murdoch. Sorry. So those two ladies were leading that project, and what we did was we worked with 12 communities, and 11 ended up joining the first school division for all of Manitoba, and that meant a lot of projects, a lot of key projects for me in terms of operations. A new way of managing systems remotely, a new way of managing student information, a new way of transferring files, all sorts of sort of very fun, very interesting projects, financial systems that needed to be set up and so on. So again, that was a leadership team that helped do that, and led by those two ladies. So we actually ended up accomplishing that, and at the end of the day, the Indian Affairs wanted to, or Indigenous Affairs wanted to recognize us for being the first to accomplish that task, and so we have our first school division that's completely run by First Nation communities and by First Nations people. So it was a lot of work, very challenging, but very rewarding. One of the things that's happened lately, though, is that we jumped into a project to start providing infrastructure, because as you know, here in Manitoba, infrastructure out in the rural communities has become an issue. So we did jump on, and we started working with SpaceX to start providing some of these Starlink to our schools and our communities. And so we've been very fortunate. We've been able to, leverage that technology to accomplish, the other things that we need to do, such as professional development for teachers through the NFNERC, and also data systems like DataBand, which is a student information system. Another project that we did recently, where we flipped over our student information system in a year, which was a record time. Again, when you start doing those large projects like that, it's a lot of planning, strategic planning. You got to plan out, your IT infrastructure, how you're going to do that, your footprint, your training plans, and so on. So again, having and dealing and moving through there, change management is always an important piece within these big challenges, and communications and discussions are always important. I can't see if there's any questions. Do we have any questions yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
But we'll have time for that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, again, some of the larger projects that I've been involved with, and the last one that I'll talk a bit about is my most recent one. So we have 37 school divisions here in Manitoba, and every school division has their own instance of their student information system. So as what I've been asked to do and tasked to do is to sit down and come up with a strategy to have one central student information system. And when you look at a project like that, there's a lot that goes into it, because it's not just one student information system, but it's everything that student information communicates with. It could communicate with the HRMS system. It could communicate with their financial system. Certainly communicates with the transportation system. So again, as we go through this, it's quite an intricate project, and we'll, we've already done a year of work on just talking to school divisions about how they use it, what they use, what their key requirements are. And then we'll do a full year once we determine off of key requirements what our solution should be. Then we'll sit down, we'll do another year or 2 years of planning for implementation. So then we'll look, at a very detailed plan for, how are we going to implement that, right down to, what are the definitions for, being present at class. So, again, those key things as you go down and get very detailed. There are probably within some of these projects, and I'll just say, take a look at Wapasqua, what was involved with that. We had project managers, we had business analysts, we had graphic designers, we had multimedia people, we had web developers, we had database people that were involved. Like all these various positions that revolve around these projects are positions that you could hold in the future. And as we start moving forward with the province, one of the things that we've often had trouble doing is hiring staff. So when you look at some of the people that I'm working with right now, we have a security analyst, we have a solutions architect, we have 2 project managers, And then we have several ancillary folks who are sitting back and just documenting, what are the key requirements. So we do have a lot of IT staff, a lot of opportunity, especially in big projects like that, for people to become involved. So as we start moving forward, those are some of the big challenges that I've had, and they're very exciting. And then again, I've been fortunate to be involved with them. We started the MF&ERC. I'll talk last about the MF&ERC. The MF&ERC supports 41 First Nation communities in Manitoba, and it provides second level services to that. My area was to provide that technical and educational technology support when I was with them. So we started that back in 1999, and it's growing strong, and still provides many solutions to communities and supports everything from language and culture lessons all the way to Starlink. So we're pretty proud of the work that we do there. And just to sum up the projects, well, POSCO has had well over 4,000 students rotate through and get their credits through that solution. So we've been very successful with that project. Diego, can you go to the next slide, number 6? Okay. The picture on the right is representative of the type of leadership that I've been encouraged to and trained at in terms of supporting my team. Anybody who's First Nations will know that when you're a leader, you want to have a full view of everything that's going on, and ensure that everybody's taking care of all of your people, your elders, the young. So one of the things you'll notice is that as this pack of wolves moves forward, is that the leader's in the back, and then the leader has a good view of everything. So what'll happen is the strongest will be up front, followed by some of the young, and then followed by some of the older wolves and the main pack, and then again followed by some of these stronger, younger wolves in the back, and then him or her following and ensuring that things happen, and that nobody's left unprotected or left behind. So that as I look at my staff, one of the things I like to do is I like to look at myself as supporting them. And if I support them in achieving their goals, they'll help me. They'll help the project or whoever I'm working for achieve the objectives of the project. So I talked a bit about the good life and how I view that. And so one of the things is that as I like to support my staff in that same way. So again, having and understanding that we have to nurture all aspects. So we make time and we dedicate a lot of effort into that in terms of allowing staff to have their spiritual days, allowing staff to have those days where, all of a sudden we may have a big project, but, one of my IT guys, his child will get sick. Well, he can't be there because he has to take care of that child. So we make sure that, we aren't imposing or making anybody feel less than because they have other responsibilities. So again, as a leader, we have to make sure that we are maintaining those relationships. When I look at my staff, I look at them from a capacity building piece. And one of the things I like to do is I like to hire staff that are dedicated and interesting and really have that desire to be there. Because again, as long as you are showing up and are showing some initiative, one of the things that I'll often say is that we can develop the capacity in many individuals to be able to do what they want to do, but they have to put the time in, and we have to allow them. One of the things that I often will do with some of my technical staff when there's a sale on, I will buy some server time for them virtually, and so they can then take and install and play around with things and again do a bit of growth for themselves on their own time, and that's what I try to encourage. The other thing I try to do is I lead for outcomes. I don't lead for time. I don't lead for face time. In terms of being with my staff, I look at the goals that we want to try and achieve, and we get there. And I don't often dictate the time that's spent on an individual task. Some tasks take longer. Some tasks we think are going to take 3 or 4 days, and they end up taking like a month. So as we go through, we want to make sure that we're adjusting once we get new information and leading for outcomes and ensuring that we're supporting our teams with any supports that they need, whether that's training, whether that's additional time or additional funding. That's why doing check-ins is so important. One of the last things I'll say about me as a leader, I like to bring in the best minds and divergent minds, people that think a little different than me, the people that approach things a little different than me, and it's really helpful in terms of solutioning to have those different perspectives and to have people who are who will challenge your line of thinking and say, hey, what about this? Or we could do that, or and so again, it's really important that when you're part of a team that you're contributing, even if you think, well, I'm not on the same line as everybody else. I'll encourage you to voice that divergent thinking, because you may come up, or you may encourage your team to go down a line that others may not have thought of, right? So I encourage that within my staff to be respectful, but to state those, hey, what about this? Can we explore this? And I think that's a key and important piece as a leader, to nurture that within your staff, that that respectful discourse is very, very important to achieving your goals. I'm gonna end it off with, and this came up the other day when I was doing a similar presentation with younger staff from the north. And if you go to my 5 recommendations. So I was asked this question the other day: what are your 5 recommendations for me, moving into the field, trying to get my first job? And what I said, I had to actually sit and think about it for a second. My advice to everybody is to take stock of yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Right? Take stock. Note your gifts. Your gifts are things that are given to you by the Creator. And nobody else has your gifts, and that's a lesson that I learned through my mushum, my grandfather. He talked to me about the fact that every individual has their own gifts. Your gifts are not the same as the person next to you, and you need to cherish your gifts, but also respect and cherish the gifts of your friends. So again, as you go forward, list out your gifts. And my other piece of advice would be, where do I want to be in 5 years? Just a short-term plan. Don't do anything long-term. I've had several positions since I've left university, and I'll tell you, in certain cases, I'll be honest with you, I never figured I'd be where I am right now, but it's been an interesting journey. And I'll say that journey is individual. Don't base your journey on anybody else's. Base it upon what you think you want to be. And then, as you mark down and take a look at where you want to be and what your gifts are, you're going to have areas that you're going to need to strengthen. So I would say that, take note of those areas that you need to strengthen, and invest some time in yourself. And again, whether that's through education, whether that's through building your network, whether that's, developing a portfolio, whatever that may be, build on those strengths. And then, again, plan for success. And I've said this a number of times in the speeches. Have a plan for yourself. And it doesn't have to be written in concrete, but it certainly should be flexible and allow you to have a plan for moving forward. And the last thing I'll say is invest in yourselves. People around you believe in you, and certainly, the most important investment you'll ever make is in yourself. Again, and I'll say that. So have a bit of belief and a bit of faith in yourself, and it'll carry you a long ways. So, those are my sort of pieces of advice for yourself. I'm hoping that you'll take it away. We've been very fortunate in our family with my sons, making their plans and so on. And that's something I've encouraged my son to do. So both of them have been very successful today. With that, the last slide is something from a Calvin comic that I ran across a number of years ago, and it's very fitting, especially in our life's journey. And it says, just Calvin saying, it's weird, day to day, nothing seems to change, but pretty soon everything is different. And that's very true. You don't notice the changes in yourselves as adults, as we go through. But day to day, you will notice those changes over time. So with that, I'll leave it open if there's any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Howard. Thank you to all the attendees. Let's see if we have any questions. Let's see. Well, we checked this. Let me ask you something.
Okay.
Um, um, can you describe some of the most personally rewarding efforts throughout your work history? I can think maybe the Wapascua Virtual College that you mentioned, making people, um, preventing them to leave their communities while they study. That was great. But I leave you. Just what do you think? What would be the some rewarding efforts through your work history?
I think you nailed it. I think that one's the culmination, because that led into, because we had that when COVID hit, we were able to support the First Nations utilizing that solution. So we were able to incorporate some K to 8 work, but we already had 40 courses fully developed. So when COVID came and students had to work from home, we had a solution that was ready to go. So again, we didn't plan for it, but because we had done the work and put the thought and effort in, we were able to respond to the needs of the communities. And again, for me, that is a long-lasting effect for First Nation communities. We've extended that now to professional development for teachers. So teachers don't have to leave the community to come get professional development. They can now do it online interactively and have discussion groups and professional learning opportunities. I think for me, because it has extended so widely, even to the point right now where, very much like this conference, we have our own conference instance, very much like this one that we've developed, and again, based upon utilizing Brightspace, that is our chosen vendor. So again, as we move forward, you never know what projects or what efforts you're going to do that you can then later on leverage into solving a different challenge. So.
Great. Yes, and you made this like 10 years ago, so you were prepared. Okay. Let's check some questions. We have Eliane. Thank you, Eliane, for attending and for your question. She asked how your team cope up with the change when the pandemic kicked in, and what did you do to make sure that your team was happy doing what they do?
Okay, so when the pandemic kicked in, we already had a solution with Teams that we had. We hadn't really used it much, but we did utilize Teams as our training platform or our work platform, and we adopted that very well. One of the concerns with Teams and working remotely is the effects of not turning off the computer. Because you're at home, there's nothing else to do, and in certain situations during COVID, as people will remember, we were locked down. We couldn't. There were weeks where you could only go out and get groceries. That piece as a leader is where you have to go on and check to make sure that people aren't working in the evenings or in the wee hours. Again, you have to make sure that your team is taking care of themselves. And I did catch a few people doing that, and I spoke to them about, instead of doing that, why don't you play a game with your family or your spouse or your friend or whatever else to take some time away, some mental time away from the ongoing work. At that point, there was a lot, because we were still setting up our COVID solution and so on. And I'll go back to what I'll say earlier regarding living the good life. As a leader, you have to watch over your team to make sure that they are, because some people can get obsessed or so focused, so tunnel visioned on things that they don't realize that they've been at the office for 16 hours. And that's one of the things where you have to at a certain point say, okay, you need to take a break, or you know what, I've noticed that it's been like 4 months since you've taken a day off. You need to take, I'm telling you right now, within the next 2 weeks, you need to take 3 days off. And I have done that. I have talked to people about, you have to take some annual leave time to recoup, because there's always that fear of mental stress and so on. So again, and encouraging folks. So again, as a leader, you have to have a vision and a good view of what people are doing, communicating and checking on them, and having meetings with them, either informal meetings where you just have a chin wag, where you're just talking about things, or you're again, one of the things I like to do is just like that, have a staff meeting where we're just doing a check-in with everybody. It's the agenda is just, okay, I do a summary of the week, and then I do a check-in with everybody to see how they're doing. So that's how I do it. Others may do it differently.
Or a little bit of work-life balance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We have one more question from Enrique. Thank you, Enrique, for asking. He's asking, what technology did you use for the 37 schools for classes, HR, payroll?
Well, for HR, we use our HR RMS system is a module off of Sage. So we use Sage, which is our financial system. But one of the things we try and do is make sure that we're not using solutions that can't be easily interoperable, because if you do that, then you have problems exchanging information between systems. So again, that's one of the big pieces as you go through your decision making, is taking a look at how well systems work together. And again, I like the fact that when you start doing some of these pieces, it's better that you do them all at once and take a broader view, and then start knocking the projects off one at a time. And that's one of the pieces that we talk about. When we started with the school divisions, we were still using, and this was a while ago, we were still using Maplewood, but we've transferred over to a different student information system, one that's specifically designed for First Nation schools, because we do have different processes. And what I mean by that is, it was not what we teach the kids differently, but the process of financing and tracking of outcomes is a little different in First Nation schools than it is for public schools. So we have a different information system there. But yeah, so again, making sure interoperability and scalability is a very important piece, because as you start looking at a solution, often I will have a teacher that will come up to me and say, well, I found this great solution that we could implement with everybody. And then you look at it as, yeah, it is a great, single use solution. But then when you try and bring it in and bring it into an environment and make it scalable for everybody, you soon find out that it wasn't designed to do that. It doesn't have the capabilities to do that, and there's no way to manage things. And that's one of the things when you're working with students, you have to remember that whatever types of systems that you're putting in place, you have to put a system in place that's safe for a 6-year-old. So you may have a 6-year-old student that's logging on to Seesaw, and you have to ensure that student, when they log on to Seesaw, that it's safe, that they're not going to be exposed to the public. So that, it is a bit of a challenge as you start moving through those things. And those challenges, again, are what make the job so interesting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one more question from Danny Lynn. She's asking, when recruiting IT employees, what quality traits do you look for?
What I like to look for is someone who's had some consistency with what they're doing. So whether that's you're a student or whether you're coming off of a different job, when I recognize that someone's committed some time at a place, I know that I can rely upon them to be there. The other thing I look for is someone who has an end goal who can articulate where they want to be in 5 years, who can articulate, what their aspirations are. They come with a bit of background knowledge in the field and some good basic skills, because you're never going to go into an environment and 100% be ready to take on that role. That's where on the job training for specific applications, you may have a good idea of how networking works, but you might not be a Cisco person, or you might not be a WatchGuard person. So again, that's where employers like myself will ensure that you have the proper training for that. So that capability to be trained is very important, and your openness to being trained is very good. And also, keen and very important is that your ability to work with others. One of the things I'll say, and was taught to me by my mother, was you don't have to like everybody, but you have to be able to get along with everybody. And that's like any workplace. Again, for myself, when I look at somebody, their openness to work with everybody, their ability to work with people, even people they may disagree with. It's very important, and maintaining those relationships is very important. I don't like everybody I work with, but I certainly do enjoy working with them. So, again, being professional is important, and
Yes.
being thoughtful. So,
yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you.
okay.
So we are running out of time. So thank you, Howard, for your time and your presentation and all your experience. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You can all access Howard's and my Hubilo profile if you want to send us any question, add us to LinkedIn. And now you can go to the networking lounge on the dashboard. So again,